Hello and welcome to another episode of the Corner 3 here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. As always, I'm your host, Cale Berger. Pleased to be joined again by Mike Asti. And
happy to be back, man.
Yeah. The dust has settled. NBA free agency has relatively come to a close with most of the big names deciding where they're going to play next season and beyond. And sure enough, it was one of the most wild free agency periods I think we've ever seen. We had trades. We had surprise decisions. We had just so much drama, as always, that only the NBA can provide.
Yeah, it was more wild than we thought, and going in, we all knew it was going to be wild.
Exactly.
That's the thing. There was more madness than ever before, which is saying something. But I will say it added to the Independence Day weekend, Independence Day fun. I'm wearing the Captain America tee here after another World Cup title for the U.S. I got the Louisville Slugger hat on right here, so I'm transitioning from the 4th of July and NBA free agency to the Midsummer Classic in Major League Baseball. I'm ready to go here. Yeah, it was a madness of a free agency period that I think would make Macho Man Randy Savage very happy.
It really was. It was a phenomenal free agency period. All that drama, and it definitely lived up to the hype and exceeded the hype. We're going to talk about Kawhi and Paul George, the Clippers, the winners and losers of the free agency period, the competition between these two LA teams now, and how it's going to be a lot of teams in the West, but mainly those two, I think, going at it.
Going to hurt our sleep schedule. Not going to get much sleep, unfortunately, next season here on the East Coast.
If I'm being honest, the games I usually catch are the 10:30 games anyways, just because I'm done with stuff for the day.
Okay, so it works out well for you.
And then we're going to talk about maybe some non-top tier players that will have a big impact next season and going forward that signed in free agency, and then the Russell Westbrook trade rumors as well that have come out of the last few days in the aftermath of the Kawhi and Paul George decision. But first things first, Kawhi and PG heading to the Clippers. Kawhi making his long-awaited decision 2 nights ago at like 2 a.m., as only Kawhi would do.
Yeah, it was typical Kawhi. He changed the whole balance of the league at 2 in the morning on a Friday or Saturday morning.
Thankfully, I was just getting off work. I was up and I caught the news from Kawhi. But Kawhi goes to the Clippers, choosing them over the Raptors and the Lakers. And part of the reason was they were able to secure a trade for Paul George to team up with him. Yeah. And the Clippers sent a record-setting haul to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Paul George, who still has 3 years left on his contract that he signed last summer in free agency. Yeah. They sent 4 first-round unprotected first-round picks, 1 protected first-round pick, 2 pick swaps, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Danilo Gallinari, all for Paul George. So the Thunder clearly going rebuild. Yeah. My initial reaction to this was, oh my God, this was the biggest Woj bomb we've ever seen.
That's saying something too.
My second reaction was, they are, I think right now on paper, maybe the best team in the NBA, because this was a team that last year won 48 games without a true superstar, took the Warriors to 6 games in the first round of the playoffs with Patrick Beverley, with Lou Williams, the 6th man of the year, with Montrezl Harrell, with a great core right there already, and now you add 2 top 10 players, 2 MVP candidates from last year, onto one team. I think it was a phenomenal job by the Clippers and a phenomenal job by Jerry West to get this done.
Well, it was, absolutely. It was kind of a shock because even though the Clippers were involved in conversations and everybody knew, even a casual fan knew, that the Clippers, more so than any team, including Toronto where he won the championship, had been courting Kawhi Leonard from back even to the rumors of him being upset in San Antonio. It's been a 2-year courtship. Part of why even Jerry West was there. Jerry West wanted the Lakers job. That didn't happen. He wanted to retool himself there. He went to the Clippers to kind of show them. And then part of his position was to bring in Kawhi. Yeah. He seemed to be that free agent that could change the league, that was a two-way player, that was young enough, hitting his prime, that had the Hall of Fame type of resume that he could build up to bring there into LA, being from the area, being a guy that maybe didn't want the limelight of the Lakers, maybe didn't want to mess with LeBron. And he got him over at Cliptown. I think the real amazement was, and I did actually bring this up, if you remember on the last show, that Toronto was that organization. The reason why they kind of worked there and he won the championship and even considered staying there, even though it's across the country and a place he never severely wanted to be.
It's not even across the country.
Well, it's in another country. It's across the continent. It's in another country. Yeah. Which, a little aside here, I think we're still seeing that it's going to be very difficult for Toronto to build off that one championship in that area. I mean, Marc Gasol re-ups, but that's about it for them.
They signed Rondae Hollis-Jefferson.
We'll see what happens with Kyle Lowry, too, depending on how he plays. Yeah. But it's still going to be very, very difficult for them. So they're going to celebrate that championship probably for decades, as they should. Yeah. But anyway, It was the fact that would any other organization, would any other executive offer Kawhi the same thing he had in Toronto in terms of comfort? And would they offer him the load management?
Yes.
Would they let him basically dictate in a text message at midnight on a night before a game if he's playing or not the night before? Would they let him say, I'm taking 2 weeks off before the playoffs? Would they let him do those things? And the only concern of the Lakers, besides LeBron and the circus, they probably, Jeannie Buss, very old school, wouldn't want to do that. Probably wouldn't do that. And I did say I think Jerry West would go in that direction. I don't know if that played a role. Clearly, Paul George being there was a critical part of this and had to happen. But
here's what I'll say. I think the Lakers are probably in the best situation to offer Kawhi that load management option.
Because of the other stars.
Because the other two stars there.
Right.
What I will say, though, is I think the reason why this got done for the Clippers is obviously they had to make the move and acquire more talent and get Paul George. They were able to do that.
Right.
And he clearly wanted to play with Paul George as Kawhi was actively recruiting him.
Yeah, there were even rumors Toronto.
As the story goes, apparently he was meeting with the Lakers in LA and changed the location of their meeting last minute because right after he had a meeting with Paul George to recruit him, which is Kawhi playing mind games, playing chess while everyone's playing checkers.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of underrating Kawhi as...
but here's what I'll say, though, is that the big thing about this is, and the big thing with Kawhi is he is all about trust.
Right.
And the Raptors gave him that last year, but they had this media frenzy, and everyone wanted to know, and maybe they're a little too all over him in this process.
They were very clingy.
They were. You look at the Lakers, and the Lakers, he met with Magic Johnson or whoever he met with, and immediately the next day there were quotes and stories in the LA Times. Okay, they did not keep things under wraps.
Right.
With the Clippers, even at points where it looked like they were the odd team out in this whole thing, kept things under wraps, moved in silence, and were able to get Kawhi in this, I think, because they were able to keep leaks to a minimum and were able to keep his trust. And
that's big.
The other thing for Kawhi, too, we saw from this is that Kawhi is really, I don't think anyone really anticipated to him be that LeBron kind of guy where he's going to do the work behind the scenes to recruit, to get a team together, to wheel and deal.
Right.
But I think what we're seeing now is that Kawhi is turning into that guy. He's a guy who's taking care of his own legacy, who's putting his own legacy and his own future in his own hands, and actively recruiting Paul George. And I think we're seeing that you don't necessarily have to put everything out there in the public to be able to make moves and get things done with Kawhi.
And it's also not just LeBron who's able to do that in this era.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing Kawhi kind of being that next era superstar, taking the torch from LeBron, that I'm now going to change the league. I'm now going to recruit guys. And that is the way of the NBA now. I mean, I have this rant that I've been saying since really LeBron went to Miami, that it's not a new thing in the NBA to have super teams.
No,
they've always been the case in the NBA. Throughout NBA history, every NBA champion, with the exception of the 04 Pistons, 2011 Mavs, and arguably the 2019 Raptors now, had at least multiple Hall of Famers, if not 2 or 3, and certainly multiple superstars in their prime in most cases. Where that's still the same situation now, but the difference is now the players are in control. The players aren't waiting for teams to make trades or draft guys, or with free agency, guys aren't going to stay in the same team. Teams would have to do more to make that happen, so players aren't waiting around. They're giving these franchises 1 or 2 years to get things moving, and if it's not happening, they're forcing their way out. I'll see you. They're kind of in control of the league. So, yes, I think myself and everyone did kind of underrate Kawhi as being a recruiter, as being an intelligent guy that would do this behind the scenes because he didn't want the limelight. The interesting thing to me is there also was the rumor that we didn't learn until after the move to the Clippers with Paul George in that trade, that apparently it almost as if he was just tailing on. He wanted Paul George and would just go wherever Paul George was going to be. That there was a rumor that Toronto potentially had an opportunity to trade for Paul George. It might have involved Russ, which would have been way more money, and that wasn't something they were going to do to mortgage their future.
Also, Toronto didn't want to give up Pascal Siakam in that deal.
Part of mortgaging the future they didn't want to do.
Exactly.
But we never will know this, but if they would have been willing to do so, would he then have went back to Toronto? Not a short-term deal like some would have thought. Would he have signed a long-term max deal with the Raptors?
I think there's a very good chance he would have.
If Paul George went over there. So that would have been an earth-shattering type of news based on what he had publicly said with San Antonio and then that trade and what he wanted out of his life. So a lot can change in a year. I think we've learned from NBA free agency. I think we also learned, and this was proven, that many teams, because the Raptors, despite losing Kawhi, they have a championship. They have a parade. They're going to celebrate it forever. They're all thanking him. I threw the graphic up there thanking him. He'll probably have a jersey retired there off 1 year. He'll probably have a statue there off 1 year. I even tried to think about this in terms of sports history, every league. I can't really think of another guy that for one full season, that's it, gets a number retired and maybe a statue in any other city. And that's insane. 1 year?
The only other guy I can think of, and I've seen this over the last few days, is when Deion Sanders went to the Cowboys for
right.
that
I saw that
title. I don't know if he has.
I don't feel like the Niners though are celebrating hitting him like Kawhi is being celebrated. I don't even know if they certainly have no statue. I don't know if there's any number retirement, but that is similar. Yeah. He went there for win a championship and then went to the Cowboys and stayed the rest of his career. But it's just interesting.
But we were certainly waiting on Kawhi all week or for multiple weeks, and he finally made a decision, and it caused some earthquakes maybe in Los Angeles. But now this sets up. Will it end up being the battle of the LA teams or in the Western Conference? And what I'm going to say first things first is I do think that we're probably most likely going to see a Western Conference Finals between these two teams if everyone stays healthy. But what I will say though is the West is still clearly better than the East and is still stacked from top to bottom.
For sure.
And I will say though the other thing too is that we talked about how the super teams, and it's always been super teams, and it's now the league is kind of taking a turn to now it's a bunch of duos. It's almost like NBA Jam where you have like
the stars are more spread out than
16 to 18 teams that all have 2 stars on them and 2 legitimate guys that you would trust. I mean, really though.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would like to see them. We'll just do 2-on-2.
Yeah, I mean, because
be very, very
you look at obviously the LA teams, and then you have Portland with Dame and CJ. You have Dallas with Luka.
Even
and
Utah
Porzingis.
now.
Utah now with Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on. The Bucks with Giannis and Chris Middleton. The entire league seems to be these duos. And how can we forget the Brooklyn Nets as well?
Right.
With Kyrie.
They're waiting a year for theirs, but yes.
But I'm not sure if it'll end up being the battle of the LA teams as much as we think. I think that's probably my prediction now, but I still think that
which team would upset it if it didn't happen? Because that's clearly what everyone's going to predict. That's what every national media outlet is going to want to be the case.
Of course.
It's already the LeBron AD. This almost is better for the NBA in a way that he didn't go to the Lakers. Yes, super teams have been good for the league, and I've said that too. But this makes it 2-on-2. This makes an NBA Jam style with Kawhi and Paul George versus LeBron and AD.
I think the one team that I really like what they did, and this kind of transitions into our winners and losers of free agency. So I think one of my biggest winners, I would say, outside of the obvious, I would say the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz.
Yeah, we mentioned them on the last show.
A few weeks ago, they were able to make that trade where they got Mike Conley to pair with Donovan Mitchell, but also in free agency, they trade away Derek Favors to get some assets back for him.
Right.
But they make one of the most underrated signings in Bojan Bogdanovic, who came over from the Pacers, who had a career season after Oladipo got hurt. He's now going to play the stretch 4 for them alongside Joe Ingles, Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley. I think especially on the surface in terms of starting 5, I really like what the Jazz have in terms of just they look to be one of the balanced and dangerous teams as in every position they have a strong player right now. And, it depends on what they do with the bench as well, but I really like what the Jazz did in free agency.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's what's being lost, and it also will transition into this segment, because as much as it was about Kawhi and the superstars and what was happening there with the top-tier talent, even KD and Kyrie going to Brooklyn with KD missing a year, but a lot of lower level tier 2, 3 free agents this year really are going to have an impact in the league, and it's going to be about which team has more of a bench. Because I think that's part of your opening there with talking about the Clippers being maybe the best team and being the NBA championship favorite is crazy of a sentence that I never thought I'd say the Clippers are the favorite to win a title. Arguably the worst franchise in all of sports history is the Clippers, and they could win that first championship, or at least they're the favorite right now. But the reason why they're the favorite over, say, the Lakers with LeBron and AD is because they had a playoff team last year. They have a bench. They have the 6th man of the year in Lou Williams, who probably would start on most other teams. They have a capable overall team unit with a Hall of Fame coach, whereas the Lakers have a good coach, but somebody that's not yet got over the hump. They have kind of controversy with Jason Kidd waiting under him. They have arguably no real bench. Rondo maybe coming back now. There are different pieces there, but they're older. They're pieces that didn't play full season last year because of injuries. They're pieces they have question marks about. Even Kuzma, he's probably going to emerge as the third guy, but is he yet to that level yet? Maybe is he a year away from getting to that point? It's going to be interesting with them, and there's a lot more question marks around them. Whereas, as much as they might have less star power, teams like the Utah Jazz, teams like the Denver Nuggets, teams like the Portland Trailblazers, which Damian Lillard's going on all these national shows saying, don't forget about me. You're forgetting about us. Because the reason why, not only do they have a better bench than, say, the Lakers, but they also have some continuity that the Clippers don't even have. Yeah. As much as it's a star-driven league and the stars have won championships, and that still is why the Warriors don't even count them out yet, because there's still star power there. Even with Clay missing half the year and KD being gone, the stars do drive the league. But there is something to be said, which we're now kind of losing in this LeBron super team era. There's not as much continuity of guys playing together more than a few seasons, because then they want to go to that next destination when somebody starts to fade. Whereas the Jazz, the Nuggets, the Trailblazers, hell, even the Rockets, despite all their drama, they now have several years of playing together where there's a chemistry for good or bad. There's a continuity for good or bad. They know where each other is going to be on the court. They know spacing. There's no maturation process. They don't have to really learn anything in the offseason. They don't need to worry about practice as much, whereas those teams need to gel together. One of those teams could surprise and upset that apple cart just because of they have so much continuity together. You mentioned Utah being one of those teams, but I think Portland's another one. Despite losing Cantor and that whole weirdness of making him decide in 6 minutes, which is just embarrassing for a team that is on the cusp of maybe winning a title. That's just insane. But they have a lot of continuity themselves.
They do.
They have a lot of shooting. They have a lot of chemistry. Denver has size. They have also continuity. They have chemistry. They're very, very underrated in terms of their stars with the Joker and company. So just out west, one of those teams, because of chemistry, might have a chance to bust in there if there's injuries or any drama with the stars.
I do agree, but I do think two little caveats here just before we move on for both those teams. For the Trailblazers, they actually lost some shooting. And some guys. Mo Harkless now Clipper, and Seth Curry now goes to the Mavericks. So he was one of the best shooters in the league last year. He's gone. Also, Yusuf Nurkic still hurt. They make a trade to get Hassan Whiteside to kind of fill in temporarily for him. Right. But I don't think anyone wants Hassan Whiteside. And
no, the Heat were glad to dump him off.
I think Yusuf Nurkic is definitely a way better center, and it'll be, it remains to be seen how he'll play when he gets back from that gruesome leg injury. But
I will say you had the tweet of NBA free agency, though, where I was hoping it would actually come to fruition. We could see it, but then the Heat made the trade of how long would it be until Jimmy Butler and Whiteside throw hands? Because it would have been practice number one.
It would have been.
That might even have been part. Maybe Jimmy Butler even said to them, look, I'll greenlight this, but you got to get Whiteside out of this.
A little remembrance from one of Hassan Whiteside's best moments from Miami, his tenure there, when he got an assault rifle stolen out of his car that he had in the trunk of his car.
Right.
Jimmy Butler, what if he walks in the day one of practice there with the assault rifle? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Yeah. That seems like a very Jimmy Butler move.
Right.
But also with the Nuggets.
Maybe Whiteside will be more focused now in Portland because he seemed the Miami vibe got to him and ruined him a little bit.
You're right.
Maybe this is good.
But with the Nuggets as well, they do have all that young talent, and Jokic, who was phenomenal last year, and everyone's just getting better.
Right.
But now we have more injury issues with Michael Porter Jr. He's now going to miss all of the summer league, and he was kind of looking to step in as their starting small forward this year, and that's really been an issue that they've been looking to fill since they traded away Melo. However many years ago, the starting small forward on the Nuggets.
Right.
So there's still caveats to those teams, but I agree. I'm not going to say right here, right now, that it's just the Lakers and the Clippers. I think it's still very talented across the West, but I will say that all of those teams do have some issues, including the Lakers.
Well, I have one question for you, though, because this kind of does bring something up. With as much as this is player movement and player deciding things, and there are always being super teams in the NBA, regardless of how they get there, they've always been there through NBA history. There is still a sense, as much as you don't need to be in a certain city or market to beef up your brand, and you can certainly be a global phenomenon like a Russell Westbrook in Oklahoma City, the teams like Denver, like Portland, like Utah, and I brought this up on Twitter after the Mike Conley trade, and I think we talked about it in the last show, they still need to be creative with trading for guys and giving up draft picks and trading for guys that are past their prime, trying to get some lightning in a bottle. So the only issue is, and I don't know, do you think this might eventually become a problem even more so now than before because this is players deciding things, that the players, just like in the past, where the money was influenced by the owners, they still only want to go to the major media markets. And with so much controversy on certain, some people saying that we should get rid of the draft because this is player like Zion didn't really want to go to New Orleans and that's not fair. And now players are moving $400 billion to move all these free agents and become duos as well as big threes in the past. If everybody gets their way and all those things happen and they continue to happen more and more, as I figure it would, that's only going to push the smaller markets further out from at least having an easier time at contention. They're going to still be relevant. They have good teams. Maybe continuity will help them.
Yeah.
But eventually those players will leave for money, for greener pastures, and they won't be able to have the quick fixes of even the Clippers, who've been a losing franchise but are in L.A., are able to do because they bring in free agents. It's not even about the franchise. It's about the market and the city still. And even Miami with the trade of Jimmy Butler. That's not a free agent signing. It's technically a sign and trade, but that's a big market. They were able to muster something and put it together, where the small markets are doing smaller ancillary moves, minor trades, or losing a guy like Paul George now having to rebuild. Is that eventually going to be a problem? Because it's different. There maybe is more NBA duo talent spread out now, but it's still the big markets. And eventually there's more small markets in the league.
Yeah.
And eventually those owners might get together and try to budge a collective bargaining agreement and saying, we're not going to agree to your terms unless this changes. What happened last time after the Miami Big Three with LeBron, the owners in the CBA and those small markets, the Dan Gilberts of the world, they were able to complain enough where that's the reason why you have this super max deal, whereas if you re-sign with your current team, you can get $50 million more money. They were trying to avoid this, but players don't care. They can make money up on endorsements. They want to play with their friends. They want to win. They care about their brand. But could they do something else to try to prevent it? Because there was an ownership small market move already once to stop this. Clearly it's out of control again. Will they clamp down? Will this make an issue for the next CBA?
Potentially, I think. I mean, but like you said, I think the players are just going to do kind of whatever they want.
Probably.
We're in the era of the power to the players right now.
Right.
And, I don't think it's entirely the guys just want to play in the big markets. I think that, as we're seeing, the Knicks are a disaster. They're a dumpster fire. No one really wants to go play in Chicago right now.
Right, and LeBron was able to bring guys to Cleveland.
That's the thing. So, I don't know how much I believe that, it's completely going back to the dark ages or something, but I do think that definitely the players are still going to have control over this, and the players are still going to decide what they want to do, and I don't know what other measures the owners could take.
No, because the Supermax was a big measure. I mean, that was a big measure.
What else are you going to do? But maybe a team that we think was a loser of free agency. Do you have one for me? I have two.
Okay, well, it's hard to think of one. Man, gee, I don't know.
We just talked.
You just mentioned them? Okay, well, I appreciate the assist there. Yeah, the New York Knicks clearly are the biggest loser for me. And I know there were other teams that swung and missed. There's other teams that are doing wild things. There's other teams that are giving up on their current era, say Oklahoma City, even though they got a haul for Paul George with 5 number ones that I don't think anybody would have ever dreamed he would have garnered in value. So maybe they're not even a loser. There's definitely other losers you could bring up. However, the Knicks, like the Clippers, for example, if the Clippers would not have got Kawhi and they wouldn't have been able to trade for Paul George and the Toronto Raptors would have pulled that off, and then the Clippers would be a loser. They would have been sitting there with the playoff team from last year with Doc Rivers as the coach, Lou Williams, 6th man, but no star. That wouldn't have been enough. They would have been below the Jazz, the Nuggets, Trailblazers, etc. The Lakers would have certainly owned LA again. But they were able to get Kawhi. They got Paul George. They pulled it off. The Raptors are still the defending champs, so they kind of have a year to do a victory lap. But the Knicks, for even longer than the Clippers, have been waiting for this summer. They've been waiting for the summer of 2019 for, no joke, probably 3 or 4 years, at least publicly. That's how long. It might even have been longer. Certainly Kawhi is their main piece. But also they got unlucky because Kevin Durant was the guy they were waiting for even when he got to Golden State. They thought he'd win titles there, but then go ahead and rescue us after that's over. But he got hurt in Game 5 of the NBA Finals. That pretty much made it where that probably wasn't going to happen because he wanted to be put with a second guy in Kyrie. Kyrie didn't want to go to the Knicks. He wanted to go to Brooklyn. It helped convince KD to go there and waited out a year in Brooklyn. The Knicks don't end up with him. They don't even get a meeting with Kyrie, which is just, they don't even get a meeting with Kyrie Leonard. That's embarrassing right there, even though they rumored to maybe wanted one, whether they admit that or not. They do the whole thing with KD where they're saying, we didn't really want you, we didn't want to give you the max, even though he was their piece for years. Which, if that's true, that's stupid, but they might even have been lying to kind of save face, so either way, it's ridiculous. They end up with Randall in terms of a free agent signing where they have to give money to somebody. They're not going to be a playoff team again. They're going to wait for more free agent summers. They're going to tell everybody that they're waiting for the next guy to come up in free agency. They're not going to sign him, with the exception of Carmelo Anthony and Amar'e Stoudemire, who did go there as a free agent. There has not been a true superstar, a Hall of Fame caliber player in the last 20 years, since really James Dolan bought the team, that has actually wanted to be with the New York Knicks, whether they're from there or not. Carmelo wanted to get traded there. Amar'e signed there. outside of that, nobody's wanting to be there. They have a circus for an ownership. They have a influx of head coaches. They actually have a better head coach, I think, than the Nets have, but it hasn't been able to lure anybody over.
I don't know. I like Fizdale, but I also like Kenny Atkinson.
Okay, but the point is they have a better head coach than they've had in recent years, at least in terms of what the players would care about. But it hasn't worked. Nothing's worked. They brought in no free agents. They're going to lose again. They're not even sexy. There's no reason to even go to the Garden.
Here's what I'll say. I think the problem with what the Knicks did is the Knicks came into this as they kind of come into every situation, similar to how the Lakers do as well.
Some arrogance.
There's arrogance, and they rested on their laurels and thought, we are the New York Knicks, we have the Garden, why wouldn't guys want to play here? And like we talk about time after time, guys want to play in a good situation, you know, for a good owner, where there's not drama scenario in most cases. And the Knicks didn't really do anything to try and fix these problems that they've had or to go out and try to sweeten the deal for free agents or to show them that they've changed. They didn't do any of that. And they weren't going to offer KD the max, apparently, for some odd, stupid reason.
Do you believe that, or do you think that, I mean, there's also reporters who are saying that...
No, I believe it. Because they're stupid. I do believe
because of the injury you think shot him away? Because there's a belief maybe that they were going to offer and they're kind of like the bitter ex-girlfriend that you chose her.
I 100%...
Okay.
I 100% believe
either way,
that the New York Knicks decided not to offer Kevin Durant a max contract because there's a poorly run franchise. As simple as that. But this was a matter of the New York Knicks just completely bumbling this entire thing. Again, as always. And
they've been waiting for years.
Yes. And what I will say, though, is they did I think they did an okay job of obviously swinging and missing, but they did a good job of, I guess, making the best of an awful situation by what they did was they signed all of these free agents to 2-year deals with, well, I guess 1-year deals with team options.
Yeah, it's not like when they brought in Amari when they missed out on LeBron when they gave him a long-term deal. No. This is a shorter situation that they're going to retry again in 2 years.
They signed Randall, they signed Bobby Portis, Alfred Payton, whoever else they signed. They signed it to these 1-year, potential 2-year deals with team options because I think what their plan is to go after big free agents again in 2021. And that's all they can do.
Again, to be fair, that is a little smarter than in the past because these aren't long-term deals like they even got locked up with Carmelo. That's not the case here. These are short-term deals. They can putter away for 2 years, go back into this again. But let me put it this way. What would give any Knick fan or anyone any confidence at all that in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 20 years, no matter what it is, as long as they have the same ownership group in place and it doesn't appear Dolan's going anywhere because he's making money there, that they're going to be able to lure anybody in whenever that comes up again. So they're going to keep on, even these short-term deals, a little smarter now, but they're going to keep swinging and missing. And like you said with the arrogance of Madison Square Garden, it's cool to play there, but having a road game a few times a year seems like it's good enough for these players. They can get a historic 60-point game there. They don't have to play there every day. And now the worst part of it is for the Knicks, it's not a team that's in another part of the country. It's not a team that's in their division. It's not a rival. It's not even a team that they're just sharing a media market with like it used to be when they were in New Jersey. The Brooklyn Nets, no joke. That would be like if a Pittsburgh team didn't sign somebody and Monroeville did, for anybody familiar with Pittsburgh. Brooklyn's not even a city. It's a borough. I mean, they're paying the taxes to the same area in some respects. They might literally, no joke, they could share the same apartment building with Knicks players and not have any real traffic issues. That is how close quarters they are. So Kyrie's whole thing where he was doing the Instagram, this is a little rant, he was doing the Instagram, walking on the bridge and coming home. Okay, he was from New Jersey. That's where the Nets used to be when they were in the finals as a kid. He's not from Brooklyn, so he's literally not going home. But it's cool that he's playing for the team he grew up rooting for. But that's also part of it. They have the Nets thing that's going to get in their craw.
Yeah, well, the Nets, they've clearly done things the right way. They built this team back up the right way, and the Knicks have clearly been a stick in the mud this entire time. And you know what? The teams that do it the right way and that are smart in the front office and they make smart coaching hires, they get rewarded. And that's what we've seen with the Brooklyn Nets, who also were one of the teams that I thought obviously won free agency. The other team that I thought really took a loss was the Charlotte Hornets. And as much as MJ might have been the GOAT on the floor, I think he's also been a really poor owner.
I mean, one of the worst ever. From
one of the worst owners, and we kind of give him a pass.
He's the WOT.
And you look again at what they did in free agency. They signed this 3-year, $58 million deal with Terry Rozier, which everyone's looking at and is like, that's a terrible contract because Terry Rozier had that really good playoff run 2 years ago, but was pretty much non-existent.
I would have rather just let Kemba walk and not brought in Terry Rozier.
But that's the other thing, too, is you had Kemba Walker was a guy who seems to be happy with Boston, but clearly wanted to stay in Charlotte.
He did.
And Michael Jordan had the audacity to offer him less than the max contract, and not only for a guy that wanted to be in Charlotte that was the franchise player, but he offered less than the max to a guy who was signed with his brand, who was a Jordan brand player, and he offered him less than the max. They were in Paris a week before free agency for Paris Fashion Week, all hanging out with Carmelo, with Maya Moore, with every Jordan athlete, and he offered the guy less than the max, and he ended up walking, and now you sign Terry Rozier as the replacement. You look at their cap situation for this coming season. They're paying Nicholas Batum $25 million, $17 to Bismack Biyombo, $15 to Marvin Williams, $14 to Cody Zeller, $13 to Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. It is one of the worst cap situations, and they're going to win 10 games, I think.
Yeah, no, obviously they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. And unlike some other teams that had to make some trades, like, for example, OKC is now fully rebuilding. They might trade Russ. They traded Paul George. They got a haulback of 5-1s basically in the next few years. They're set up for the future.
Here's what I don't get. If you were not going to offer Kemba Walker the full max contract, why did you not trade him a year ago to a contender when teams wanted him?
100%.
And it's another stupid
They knew
decision.
they weren't going to win then. He was still an all-star. He had incredible value. And not only that, again, if you're going to lose him, you don't even fix your cap situation if you're going to lose him. You bring in another bad contract in Rozier, who's an overrated player, probably not going to do it there as the Lone Ranger star, is actually going to end up hurting his value. And the other problem is with the Hornets that even the Knicks didn't do this. The Knicks actually, going into this free agency, they swung and missed. They didn't sign anybody of note, but they cleared space. They traded Porzingis. They got ready for free agency. The Clippers did the same thing. The Lakers, if it wasn't for Pelinka and even Magic Johnson making some moves and getting Mozgov off the books and making certain trades, they wouldn't have been able to trade for Anthony Davis because they had to clear the space. Certain teams, in order to prepare to swing and miss or hit a home run, nothing's guaranteed, as we learned, but you have to take the chance. You have to shoot your shot, literally, by clearing the space. The Hornets, I don't know if they were arrogant that Kemba would stay no matter what they offered him because that's what he was saying.
That's what it was.
Or, to be honest with you, though, even if that was the case and they thought he would come back, they still don't care about winning because, as you said 2 weeks ago on our preview show for free agency, that even if he did stay there, they wouldn't win because they didn't have any room to sign anybody else to make it a duo like everybody else in the league.
He could have signed the vet men, and they still would not have had cap space.
So they didn't have the team ready, they didn't have the roster ready, they didn't do anything to make moves for this free agency.
You know what?
They're in the worst situation for the future. Not only are they the worst team now, but they're in the worst situation for the future too.
They had a worse free agency than the Knicks, I thought.
Oh yeah, no. In all fairness, they were. Here's the difference. They had a worse free agency from the Knicks from a basketball perspective.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm going to go with the Knicks as being the worst is because, number one, they are the Knicks. They're a name brand franchise that, much like the Cubs prior to 2016 and still like the Toronto Maple Leafs, they have a name brand, they have history, everybody goes, they sell out games, they're always in national, they're a marquee franchise, they're in national events, but they very rarely are a title contender. And seemingly they don't have to be a marquee franchise because of the history there. No championships in 73. They got close with Ewing and didn't get it done. Since Dolan took over, it's been stars, but very little winning. They continually don't get any free agents there. They hype them up all the time. They always wait for free agency summers. Their fans are clearly not going to wait around, or they're going to keep complaining because it is New York and the media market that is New York. So there's a lot more pressure on them finally getting something right. And even if they don't win a title, to bring in a guy like KD or bring in Leonard or bring in even Kyrie, do something to make even Kyrie interested to bring in Durant for another year. Because there's rumors that KD's first choice was the Knicks over the Nets, and Kyrie convinced him to go to the Nets because of the Knicks' inconsistency and the fact they wouldn't offer him the max. Exactly. So that's the Knicks' problem again, that they messed it up again. So no one's going to care if you lose in Charlotte, even though they're messing this up mightily. But the Knicks, eventually this got to end. This just has to be.
I don't know if it ever will.
I don't know if it ever will either, but this is just out of control.
All right. Another team here that I'm kind of had some curious thoughts about what they did in free agency was the Philadelphia 76ers. And Obviously, they did the sign-in trade with Miami and a few other teams to get Jimmy Butler to Miami. They got back Josh Richardson, a quality shooting guard, small forward guy, and a younger guy that I think will help them. They re-signed Tobias Harris to a max contract, and then with that money they saved on not re-signing Jimmy Butler,
right,
they go out and they offer a max contract, or at least close to a max contract. Let's see if I can find the actual. It's about $27 million a year to Al Horford, who leaves the Celtics.
Right.
Here's the thing for me.
Okay.
And this is another move that I really did not like, that I thought was...
Okay, so I think we're going to agree on this.
Yes.
Then. Okay.
I like Al Horford a lot, and I think Al Horford probably made a good decision by getting more money over the long term, and he got what he wanted by opting out of the Celtics. But
right.
what I will say about Al Horford is their signing of Al Horford is that you already have Joel Embiid, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You have Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
You have Tobias Harris to play the 4.
Right.
Or the 3. Are you going to pay $27 million a year to a guy who's going to play your backup center role in Al Horford?
Yes, they are, apparently.
They are. Or they're going to do that, or they're going to play him at the 4, which is technically his natural position, but he hasn't played the 4 in 9 years.
Yeah.
Are you going to really trot out a lineup of Ben Simmons at the 1, Josh Richardson at the 2, Tobias Harris at the 3, Al Horford at the 4, and Joel Embiid at the 5? Will that be a good defensive lineup? Maybe. But here's the problem. Ben Simmons has shown a complete inability to be able to run a half-court offense and run the Sixers effectively without being in transition. He needs to be running the floor. He needs to have shooters to kick the ball out to as well.
Because he can't do this. He can't shoot.
Do that, exactly. And he's not comfortable. And
although he's going to end up getting a max deal.
And they sign him to extension as well.
Yeah.
And they sag off of him in the half-court sets. They leave him out there on an island because they know he's not an offensive threat.
Right.
Now you take away speed. You don't have any other guy you don't have a guy that can be your go-to scorer and finisher closer like Jimmy Butler was.
Right.
Like, you don't have anyone that can get
That's
their own shot.
Why he did fit there on the basketball court.
Who are your shooters now? Your shooter is Josh Richardson, who's an average a 3-point shooter. If I'm being honest, Tobias Harris can shoot the 3, but I mean, who are your shooters now that he's going to kick it out to? I mean, I just think it was overall a really questionable decision by them to sign Al Horford for the $27 million. And like I said, like I've been saying, I guess, for the last 2 weeks, and similar to what the Lakers probably should have done instead of pursuing Kawhi, is instead of using that $30 million, whatever you have, to go get that one extra player, elite guy, or below elite guy in the case of Al Horford, why don't you use that to sign 3 or 4 quality role players that fit the exact needs that you have on your team, on your bench to fill out the roster? And that's something that the Lakers didn't do, and that's something that the Sixers didn't do.
Right.
That really confused me about this Al Horford move.
And the thing about Al Horford is, and this is actually impressive, I got to give him credit because it's very rarely happens in sports, but sometimes does, and it's always interesting when it does. Al Horford has the rare distinction of going from, in a few-year period, from being incredibly underrated, where he was undervalued, where he became a key piece on a championship contender, where he was getting his name and brand back into commercials that he hadn't been since college, winning national titles at Florida, where he went from being very, very underrated to getting his just due, getting respect every single national game, but giving him his props. He's getting his due. To now, he's incredibly overrated. He has now transitioned from underrated to incredibly overrated in basically just a couple calendar years is pretty much what has happened with Al Horford.
And he's also 33 years old.
Well, that's part of him being overrated now. He had that sweet spot during where he was with the Celtics where he was a key piece to that team making an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, to even trying to have some semblance of success last year during all the drama. He was a critical part of that locker room. He was part of that culture. He was a quality player on the court who kind of found his sweet spot and built himself into a known, recognizable player again for the casual fan that wasn't the case in his prior stops before Boston. However, doing that, and this often happens, whether it be a championship team or just a contending team, that when you have role players doing that, they eventually get overrated. I mean, even here in Pittsburgh, that's happened with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Back-to-back cups, everyone gets overrated. They can't afford a lot of pieces. They end up moving on for bigger deals and not being who they were and as helpful when they were with the Penguins winning cups. That's happening here with Al Horford in terms of the NBA. Yeah. He was a great piece for those Celtics teams, but now he's become overrated. He's become overpaid. Teams had to pay him too much to get him out of there. He ended up getting a higher contract than he ever would have that he really should deserve. I mean, more props to him for doing well and getting more money.
Secured the bag.
Yeah, he secured the bag. But part of the reason why I think many thought he would fit in with the Lakers so well, and I think that actually still would have been a better fit in terms of basketball, is because
JJ Redick.
That's where I was going to go. Jimmy Butler, clearly the closer. That's a piece that he fit in more so as the number 3 guy because he made up for what Ben Simmons could not do. Yeah. Ben Simmons is not a shooter. Butler basically is just a shooter. That would have worked. That did work, even though they didn't win a title. And JJ Redick, too. JJ Redick leaving, going to New Orleans. He'll be great there for that young team. They'll be fun to watch. But he is that veteran that has been able to make threes and been able to shoot since diapers. I mean, he is a pure shooter his whole life from Duke to now, even in high school. And he's a great guy to have. He also was loved by that community. I have friends down there in media. J.D. Redick was loved by everybody down there. He was a leader in that locker room. He was a perfect veteran to have to mix with Embiid and Ben Simmons, who are younger and still kind of learning. He got them to focus and at least get some semblance of success out of them. Even with Butler being there, you needed a veteran like J.J. Redick. That's now gone. And even though Al Horford can do that locker room role, he doesn't replace what J.J. Redick gave you on the floor, which is incredible shooting, and he just fit much better with that team that they now lost, and replacing him without Horford just doesn't work on the floor.
No, I agree. So it'll definitely be some soul searching, and they'll have to figure something out in Philly to figure out what they're going to do because they don't have shooting, and they're going to be, I think, one of the slowest teams in the league now. A team that is with a star player that really can only thrive when he's running the floor, right. And now you've handicapped Ben Simmons to a greater degree because you don't have any shooters and you don't have anybody that's athletic enough to run the floor with him.
Right. I will quickly say, though, this year that I have the graphic of thank you, Jimmy Butler, I get the Raptors doing it for Kawhi.
He didn't do anything.
That's what I'm saying. I get the Raptors doing that for Kawhi, who won them a championship, their first ever. This man was there for 3 months. He was okay. He did close games. It worked on the floor a little bit, but they didn't even go to the conference finals. He missed some critical shots late in games, and there was nothing going on to deserve this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, he didn't do anything.
You don't got to thank everybody just because they walked through the door.
I agree. Our final thing here, we're going to skip to Russell Westbrook, Russell Westbrook news. Obviously now with Paul George moving on to the Clippers in this trade, the Thunder going full rebuild, and now the Thunder seem to be, there's talk of they want to get a deal done to move Russell Westbrook and his massive contract. Let me pull up the Russell Westbrook contract numbers here.
It is an albatross.
Because I want to make sure that I get them right. I want to make sure I do them justice. Okay, this coming year, Russell Westbrook will make $38.5 million. Mm-hmm. Next year, $41.3. The year after, $44. And in it's
you can't even say it because you know he's not going to be worth this
then. In 2023, when he is 33 years of age, Russell Westbrook will be making $47 million. Now, listen, I understand you want to pay your guys. You want to, if you have the Supermax at your disposal, you want to keep your guys there. You want to reward them. That's fine. Your guy's an MVP.
Right.
But you're now in a situation where you decided to go full-on rebuild, and now you're stuck with a guy who has, I think, pretty much an untradeable contract because he's a guy who's 31.
Just when we think that in sports, it ends up happening.
A guy who's going to be 31 years of age this coming season, a guy who is on a team now that is going to be rebuilding, and a guy who relies entirely on his athleticism because he can't shoot the jump shot. Mm-hmm. That's how he leads the league in triple-doubles because he's probably the most athletic guy in the league, or up there at least. That's not going to last much longer. And you're going to have a guy who's going to be making, in his final year of this deal, just under $50 million.
You still can't even say it. It's almost like you're joking.
It's ridiculous.
And even with inflation and the fact that players are going to be getting more money at that point, especially free agents, that's still going to be insane because you hit the nail on the head. Russell Westbrook probably will not be an MVP candidate. He won't be even an elite player in terms of what he's doing on the floor. He'll be a star because you know him, but $47 million for what he'll actually producing on the floor in terms of him being an athlete who's already declining and has no shot. So unless he gets a J in the next few years, that's going to be maybe the worst contract for an individual season ever in sports history. It's untradeable right now.
Now, here's the kind of the discussion. The rumors are there are teams that are interested in Russell Westbrook, and I think that Sam Presti and the Thunder want to do right by him and send him where he wants to go. The teams that I've heard are the Heat, the Rockets, I've heard the Bucks, and I've heard the Pistons. I heard the Pistons are really going hard after him. The Pistons, you would pair him with Blake Griffin on Andre Drummond. Right. I think that could be a team that could work because no one would be competing with him really for shots. With two big
on
men,
the floor.
With two big men and a pick and roll, but with those two guys, and Russ would, I think, be very deadly.
That'd almost be like a bad boy situation again. They would just hang down under the hoop, be behemoths there. Nobody would want to mess with them, and he'd take all the shots, kind of what Isaiah did.
When you look at the Rockets, it cannot happen. They have Chris Paul, who's making a similarly absurd contract. It can literally not be done to get him there, so scratch that out.
The only contract that's worse than what the Rockets are dealing with Chris Paul is this one with Westbrook.
Because no one will take Chris Paul off your hands if you try to make that trade. The Heat, I'm not sure they're willing to give up enough or that they have enough assets left to make a deal to pair him with Jimmy Butler, so I don't think that the Heat are an option. I think there's a path with the Bucks, but... Because and maybe I'm just saying that wishful thinking because I want to see Westbrook play with Giannis. I think that'd be really cool. Because they kind of look alike, don't they?
And not only that,
one's a smaller version of the other one.
And Westbrook would be that perfect guy because, as we mentioned, with small markets, you have to do creative things. He would be the perfect guy to be an already elite MVP Hall of Famer to come in there who wouldn't care that it's a small market. It would be similar to what he just dealt with in Oklahoma City. Yeah. He would be, and I think Giannis would love it because he would no longer have to do every interview. He'd have a personality in Russ that could do it with him, and they would be a title contender right away in a very easy conference, at minimum getting to a finals or two.
I would agree with that. The only thing, though, is they just signed Middleton to this very big contract as well. You look at the Chris Middleton contract that he just signed in free agency. That was one of the...
That was their number one priority, but that was a question mark whether that was going to even happen or not. They had to pay him a lot to make it happen. I wonder if in retrospect they knew about all this Russ stuff in the Paul George trade. They would regret that and would rather bring in Russ.
So the contract that Middleton just signed, at the end of it, is going to pay him upwards of $40 million also. Obviously, that's the market now. I mean, that's just the salary cap. But still, he's a max player now. Giannis.
Everybody's a max player now.
I'm fairly certain Giannis has signed now the biggest contract extension in NBA history. With what he signed this season in terms of an extension.
Right.
You look at Giannis and I guess it hasn't gone into effect. Oh, he hasn't signed it yet. He would be eligible for.
Right, I was going to say.
He would be eligible for what would be the biggest contract in NBA history.
Or he'll have an incredible market value in the open market if that ever occurs.
Yes, because he'll be a free agent in 2021.
Right, which would be insane. And the Knicks would be available again. They'd have all that space again with those 2-year deals.
But that's the thing, is I don't know if there's an option for Russ.
Right.
I don't know if there's a natural landing spot, and I know they want to do right by him, but he's a player that's in a bad situation with a bad contract, who's over the age of 30, who his game relies on one thing, and that one thing might not be there forever. I love Russell Westbrook as a player, and I love him as a personality, but I'm not sure if that's going to end up well for him and where he's going to end up playing. He might just be stuck on a team that's going to be rebuilding, and unfortunately enough for him, that could be the reality.
Well, he'll get another triple-double. I mean, if that happens at minimum, he's looking at another triple-double and maybe living his best life with all the shots will certainly go to him.
Give me Russell Westbrook averaging 40, 20, and 20 and not winning MVP because the team goes 32 and 6.
Yeah, I mean that's literally the situation this next year with the Thunder if he doesn't get traded. I think the Heat thing is interesting because of Fashion Week and him. If he has to go to a big market, that seems to fit him personality wise. But I don't see how him and Jimmy Butler also might throw hands in terms of Jimmy Butler wants to be the guy. He wants to get his shot too.
Here's the thing. I think that
maybe they would fit.
I think they actually would get along.
Personality wise or on the floor. That's the difference.
Maybe.
See, I think what's being lost. I think Kevin Durant and Russ got along off the floor. I think James Harden and Russ got along off the floor, although they wouldn't now with Harden being more of a star. But I don't think all of them got along with him on the floor. I think on the floor is different than off. Everyone loves Russ, just like everyone loves Carmelo.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that means you can play with him. That's the issue.
Well, I agree. But I think that at least from Jimmy's point of view, he's had the struggles and the issues with the guys that just don't try as hard as him.
Russ certainly would. It's 100 miles an hour every play.
Yes.
Maybe he'd be better served, though, to gear it back a little bit as he gets older, especially until he gets a J, until he has a shot.
I agree.
I would rather him gear it back a little bit. Last thing I will say, though, is the only other team that I find interesting now, which I did say was the biggest loser and everyone's making fun of, they're the big market that continuously swings and misses. They did sign some players, but they're just smaller deals. Could the Knicks finagle something to weirdly salvage this and bring in Russ? Is that possible? I'm not saying that obviously they wouldn't be a title contender yet, but if he was there, that could then give them more leverage to a year or two later. It would be similar on the floor to what he has now. They wouldn't be a title contender.
Here's what I will say.
Could they do it?
It could be done. I think it is the worst possible scenario if they did, though, because they just drafted with a third overall pick, R.J. Barrett.
Right.
The worst possible player you could pair R.J. Barrett with would be Russell Westbrook, especially at this point of his career. His growth would be stunted. I don't even think he would turn into I think he'd be out of the league.
It'd be typical Knicks, though, to finally get a big freak or get a big star to come there and have it be this in a trade with Russ.
I think Russell Westbrook needs to be paired with a star big man. That is the scenario.
So Detroit.
And that's why I think Detroit. Though I think Giannis is clear.
Yeah.
He kind of fits in there as well. So we'll see what happens with Russell Westbrook. It could be soon. It could be later. But I think he could be on the move, or he could just waste away there.
Yeah, just waste away with triple doubles and never win a title.
Because that contract seems to be untradeable. But that's going to do it for us on this edition of the Corner 3, our NBA free agency wrap up. As always, remember to subscribe. Helps us a lot. Helps us keep the lights on, keep this thing going. Follow me on Twitter, Kale_Berger.
At Mike Asti 11 on Twitter.
We will be back next week, later. Depends on when some news breaks, because it's now kind of going into a lull here.
On Russ, maybe.
There's a little bit of a lull here now with Summer League, and I've watched some Summer League this past week, and it is atrocious basketball, if I'm just being honest with you. It is tough to watch.
It is Summer League.
So when there's news, but soon enough, it'll be college basketball, it'll be Pitt basketball, it'll be Duquesne basketball right around the corner. So that being said, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next time, another edition of the Corner 3 on Pittsburgh Sports Live.